Hello and welcome to this edition of Captains of Industry out of Dubai. I'm Chris Bishop and I'm here with a man whose family reflects the story of Dubai, and also a man you need to go to, especially if you're from Africa, if you want to do business here. I'm with Mr. Omar Abdulaziz Khan. Now he's the Director for International Offices for the Dubai Chamber. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
And so, you know, you are the man to go to if you want to do business between Africa and Dubai. But it's it's going to be the busiest year ever for you. You've got Expo 2020 landing. Give us an idea of some of the activity that's underway at the moment.
Well, Dubai is never a dull town. It's always active, but 2020 is going to prove to be a good, positive challenge for us. We hope to pull off an Expo like no other before it, and hopefully after it. So there's going to be competition for the next hosting country, but Dubai Chamber itself is the official business integration partner for Expo 2020. That agreement was signed in the last Global Business Forum we had in November, and what that entails is 3 international Global Business Forum events. Now these are events that have up to 2,000 attendees, executive C-suite level, leaders, prime ministers, presidents, and it's by invitation only, so it's a very exclusive event. So we'll be hosting 3 of them. We usually take 1 year to plan one of them, so in that 6-month period between October 2020 and April 2021, we will have one for ASEAN region. Then, of course, in March 23rd, 24th, we'll have the Global Business Forum for Africa, the Expo edition, the 6th one. And then in April, the Latin American Global Business Forum. In addition to that, we will be having 30 country investment forums covering many of the emerging markets in our partner countries, starting from October on each, or very close to their national days, where we hope to expect some of the leadership to be there as well. So that is just the initial menu, so we know it's going to be developing as we progress.
We'll be talking more about Expo 2020 in October, later in the half. But just to give us a bit of background, in many ways, the 3 generations of your family,
yes,
very much dating back to the 1900s, reflect the growth and development of Dubai. Just give us an idea of how landfall for your family here, what was going on then as opposed to how it grew to now.
Well, in the early 1900s, around 1908, 1910, my grandfather, Omar Khan, came from the southern coast of Iran. As many people came from that part of the region to Dubai in the Northern Emirates, as they were welcomed here for business and to live and to thrive. And he worked for a company called Gray McKenzie as a clerk, because he spoke Indian, he spoke Arabic, English, as well as Farsi. So he was working with the company to help unload the ships and gather the workforce. He then eventually thought that, why don't I become an entrepreneur and be the facilitator for Gray McKenzie? And he started his own company in 1934-35. That's a company is now called Dubai Labor Supply Company, Dulsco, which is over 85 years old. And they have over 14,000 employees. And my father took over a few decades after that, and he ran the company for 50 years, and now they're into waste management, waste recycling, HR solutions. So you can see the different stages of Dubai, and many of the families' stories actually grew with Dubai. And that also helps in understanding how close-knitted the business community is. Whether you're from the UAE, you're an Indian, you're a Persian, or wherever you come from, that closeness is still there. Dubai is a very, as we call it, the global village.
So just give us an idea. I mean, when your grandfather landed, I mean, he must have told you stories. I mean, what was here then? And then compare that to your father's time and now to your time.
Well, I was not lucky enough to meet my grandfather. He passed away when my father was 6, but we heard a lot of stories about the development of Dubai. And every generation that came through, they said, I never thought I would see the changes that I did. And I experienced this from the age of 18 as I was going to the United States in 1995 and coming once a year in the winter. And every time I would get lost because there would be new highways, new buildings. And to this day, this carries on, which shows how adaptive Dubai is and how quick it is at identifying opportunities and grabbing them. Because we are small, we are a facilitator, so we have to be fast, we have to be effective, and we have to be quick with the decision making and the alignment behind the leadership. which is the most important thing.
What do you think is this kind of Dubai spirit that people talk about? A lot of other countries have tried to do what Dubai has done in a very short time. Not all of them have succeeded, but it seems, looking out the window at the buildings here, that this neck of the woods has succeeded. What do you think this spirit is?
I think it's trust built over the generations, trust built over the track record of our achievements. We don't only say we're going to do things, we actually achieve them. We start very humbly. We are an inspirational story to many, where we say, look, we started Emirates Airlines in 1985, where most people say, well, why start it? Leave that to the Americans, to the Europeans, or to the Asians, to Singapore or Hong Kong. Why we don't fly planes? We're Arabs. We just came out of tents. But then there was that spirit from the leaders saying, why not? Why can't we? Just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done. And we started with 2 airplanes leased from PIA Airlines, with our first destination to Karachi. Very humble beginnings. And this is also inspirational and aspirational to many of the people around us in the region, especially in Africa.
Well, I say Africa and your relationship with Africa is something we're going to be digging into in the second half here. But, and again, what do you think gives Dubai this resilience during the economic hard times and crisis that the world has faced in the last decade?
Well, in 2008, the business climate was, as you know, not very positive globally. But not many people knew that Dubai and the UAE has developed in quite a tough neighborhood over a tough period of time, and actually even the environmental climate is a desert. So it's not very hospitable. It's not natural for humans to survive, let alone thrive. And I think part of that was the challenge of that brings people together. You leave your differences and you work together for a common prosperity goals. So, and I think that's what brings, we're all in one boat, that is the UAE, that is Dubai. People have made it. They have started on a salary basis and they have become billionaires of industry. And I think the more examples you see, the more it attracts people. And the more it has a can-do attitude, the more it is connected in terms of logistics, aviation, and in terms of service, and the government being very active, the more it's going to attract people. This is a place where you can find partners very easily, you can launch initiatives, you can pilot your product, your service, and once you make it here, it's like having a star on your shoulder, because Dubai is also competitive. Some people always say we thought the streets were paved with gold. We say, well, no, they're paved with ambition.
And it's a lot of competition out there, I assume.
Yes.
When you get through. So in terms of these new companies, obviously in the Dubai chamber, you see them coming all the time. What are the new businesses and new companies coming through that make you certain that the torch is being carried through to your next generation?
Well, we have about 245,000 members. We started with 450 in 1965. We're seeing more and more diversity in the companies that are setting up, because they are very focused on leveraging Dubai in many different ways. And we see e-commerce companies, we see service companies, we see business aggregators, we see medical, pharmaceutical, technology, fintech. These are the new generation of companies where they can even grow very fast and maybe perhaps grow into unicorns, like we saw with Souk.com, which was bought by Amazon. Kareem, in less than 7 years, competed with Uber and was bought out for 3.1 billion. Now, I'm not saying everybody is going to be having that case, but I think there's this aspirational that if you're going to make it, you can make it in Dubai. And I think technology, research, and the knowledge economy, whether it's in logistics, finance, commerce, retail, the next evolution is going to be here. And what we say, Dubai 4.0. And so if you're going to prove yourself anywhere, you prove it first in Dubai, and then it's a launch pad for the wider GCC region and beyond.
And a big shot in the arm coming in October this year, as I've already mentioned. Give us an idea of the numbers, and not only people, but also how much money you think is going to be poured into Dubai in connection with Expo 2020.
Well, in terms of, let's say, starting in 2013, the infrastructure investment is estimated to be about $9 billion US dollars. The overall injection to the economy is about $32 billion US leading up to the year 2031. Because Dubai, again, is a city in the UAE, is a country always consumed with the future. We're always worried about what's next, what's the latest, what's the greatest. So also the legacy part of the Expo site is also already being sold or taken up by many companies as well, for research, for university, and so on and so forth. So, and again, this comes back from our desert mentality, where we have to always squeeze everything out of our resources. We could have done a World Cup for the football, we could have done the Olympics, but this is in our line of business. Dubai is a huge exhibition hub, and so why not do something in line with that we can utilize later as well.
And this is going to be a legacy thing, isn't it? People are going to be talking about it for the next generation. How are you is Dubai going to take advantage of that legacy?
For us, it's a platform to the next generation. One thing about the birth of the Expo initiative was that people in 2008, which only seems like yesterday, shows I'm getting old, but people were shuffling their feet, watching the news, and wondering what next bad news is going to come out. What are we going to hear about now? One part of the responsibility of a leader is to also inspire and to actually take people and tell them, you can do it, we can reach the top of the mountain, keep going. Just like a coach who's training you, where we say, no, we can't do anymore. And that's what His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, UAE's Prime Minister and Vice President and ruler of Dubai, that's what he did. 2008, 2009, people are looking at figures coming in. He said, okay, this is going to fix itself. Our fundamentals are good. We've realigned everything, but let's shoot for that star, which is the Expo. And it really accelerated Dubai out of that slump where people have written us off. And that brings me back to what I was mentioning before, the CEO of Accor Hotels, which have 4,800 rooms, hotels and 110 hotel rooms, recently in a Bloomberg interview said, don't bet against Dubai. And I think that's what we're doing. We're looking for that next milestone as we develop a lot of the inputs that are going to come out of the Expo. We're already cooking new plans for the future. And one of them is the Dubai Future District. We're looking at a 2 trillion dirham balance for Dubai. We're at just over 1 million. So that's a big target. And as we said, how are you going to do it? Well, first you have to decide where you're going to go and how realistic. If people can make it to the moon, we believe that we can reach the 2 trillion target. So there's going to be a lot of initiatives behind this, whether it's in AI, blockchain, the new 3D printed building. We're going to prove that it can be done, and we're going to show the world. And we're not going to do it alone. Just like with the Expo, we're going to do it with 192 countries. That's been our theme from the very beginning here in Dubai and the UAE, and it's going to be everybody's victory.
Give us an idea of how many African companies you've got operating here in Dubai, and then what's the interest from companies because of this Expo?
Well, out of our 240,000 members, we have about 22,000 African companies as part of our business community already. Just in 2019, from Jan to August, we registered 400 more companies.
So what kind of companies are they from Africa looking to Dubai to
Well, a lot of the companies traditionally are trading companies, service companies. They do set up hubs sometimes here for IT technology companies where they would be in Dubai and be in their respective destinations to bridge the gap in terms of servicing many technology requirements by the government or the private sector. But traders are usually the highest number because there's a lot of trade at the moment between Africa and Dubai.
And give us some idea of investment we're talking about here, some numbers for African companies investing in Dubai and the other way around.
Well, in terms of investment, I don't have an exact figure because Africa, as we know, is 55 different economies. But we do have about, in the past 4 years, we've had about an average of 42 billion US dollars of trade between us in terms. And also what I would want to highlight is that the WTO last year in April projected the world trade volumes would go by 2.6, then they downgraded that to just over 1%. Our trade with Africa has gone up 22 Dubai itself is 5%, so it beats global rates, but our trade with Africa is 22 billion in the first half of 2019, and that's 22.3%. So again, and this is just one step in the evolution. As Africa connects, and as Africa's continental free trade agreement slowly gaining momentum, we believe that this could even inject $10 to $12 billion in the relationship between 2020 and to 2025. So we think the next step, which we are seeing more, is even investments coming in. So we have investments now from Dubai to Africa in terms of in factories, in hotels and hospitality, in logistics and supply chain, including the big companies such as DP World and others, but also a lot of private companies as well.
And it seems that Dubai Chamber's on the march as well. When you say when you get an investment or people interested in investing in the country, you go and set up an office there. You don't put it out to a third party. Why did you decide to do that? It must be a little bit expensive for you.
Well, Dubai Chamber has invested about $27 million in the past maybe 8 to 9 years into the initiative of the emerging markets and specifically Africa. We have the event of the Global Business Forum, as I said, which is the apex. We have the middle-sized events focusing on countries, but then we thought that last mile delivery, that last excuse where the businessman is too comfortable in Dubai, he reads the news and he might say, well, Africa looks a bit risky to me. We say no. Africa's 54 different flavors. Let's find the right flavor for you. Let's hold your hand. Let's take you to those offices. And that's why we don't outsource them. If you're just promoting Dubai as an investment destination, that is fine. You can outsource it. But if you're going to talk to some of the top business leaders in Dubai and you're going to connect them to some of the top quality business leaders in your respective region, you need to have a very vetted office and a very competent staff who can talk business and understand requirements.
And that's another factor as well. I've been a correspondent in Africa more than 25 years. And one thing I do remember from my travels on the road is that when you read the papers, it's only 10% of the story. There's so much more going on. I mean, what are you finding as a business person traveling there?
Well, the challenge is when I ask, there's a key question I ask people. I said, what do you know about Rwanda, for example? And they always revert to the tragic events of the genocide. Rwanda has since then moved and leaped so far ahead and surprises everybody. And then the same thing, I asked some people about Mozambique, and the only thing they saw on the news was the tragic events of the hurricane hitting Beira, the city of Beira. However, they don't see the rest of the story. It's very hit and run, it's very fragmented. And that's why we put the offices, that's why we put the ecosystem for emerging markets, so there can be a continuity in the story. So we can be on the ground, we can see new legislation, new leadership, new messages, new changes, new improvement in ease of doing business ranking, new infrastructure that has been launched or put into place. For example, the East Africa Railway, and many other examples that you will not get in this information age because there's so much interference. And that's why we took it upon ourselves to filter through that and actually get the right business person, the right opportunity in the right place in the right time.
Speaking about your investments from Dubai, you said you set up an office in Mozambique, in Maputo. DP World, I know it's a big mover and shaker in the port of. It's a story we've covered over the last decade, how a port, and I recall it 20 years ago, virtually dead on its feet, is now doing more business, record business. We ran a story the other day about it. How was DP World's or Dubai Investments' long-term vision there?
Well, I'm sure DP World can speak for themselves better than me, but from my interaction, I know that they set a 7% growth in just 1 year in the port in Maputo. And we've seen their operations in Santos, in Brazil, in many different locations in the emerging markets. And they are a value-added component of Dubai. They create the goodwill, they create the efficiency. And as you know, DP World went from just a port operator to a full a holistic logistics solution provider. So because, as I said, the world always gets competitive and the middleman always has to add more value than cost. So Dubai is always looking at how it can connect to the right community and facilitate them. And that buys us goodwill for many decades ahead, I hope.
A lot of this sounds almost too good to be true. I mean, but what difficulties do you face on the African continent from time to time?
In terms of the difficulties, I think my background has been also in banking and in customer service. And it's a very simple challenge sometimes you see. What does the customer want and how can I get him to be interested? And then how do I do it? It sounds very simple, but that's very important, to be very realistic, to be understanding of who you are, what your objectives are, and who your target customer is, if you're inviting traders or investors or exhibitors. And in terms of that, I think having an office on the ground, we can be very candid, very surgical in terms of the people that we meet and connect to, and give them the feedback that we see from the business community. And they take that very positively. We give it constructively, and then we see changes. Now, the great news is, I said, as you have the offices, you have the continuity. And we are starting to see more of the youth that are graduating to the next level. And they are connected with us. For example, we were very lucky to be connected to the Secretary General of the Ministry of Economy in Angola, and Angola is really taking off recently with the new leadership. Very recently we heard that Secretary General, a very young man, very sharp, has now become the Minister of Economy. So again, you can see the continuity. It's not just let's meet, let's work together, let's sign an MOU, but actually we have action and information on the ground that we can facilitate.
What could open up in Angola for investors from Dubai?
Well, Angola is very strong in terms of, has great potential in terms of tourism, in terms of fishery, in terms of the coastline that it has. It has the second largest oil reserve in Africa. And I think a lot of it has been untapped in the previous years. So it's a very virgin market for investors now under the new leadership. And it's looking extremely promising for us.
So a question I'll put to you. A few years ago I interviewed Klaba Gatete, the finance minister of Rwanda, and I asked him about what was his feeling about foreign investment. He said, no, we want private companies to come in and take over. But surely with some countries in Africa it's going to be a tipping point where maybe some countries are feeling they're losing control of their own economies. Are you experiencing that?
Well, I think when the way Dubai comes in, if you look at, for example, Majid Al Futtaim Group, they've entered into Kenya recently. And they were quite successful. They went, I think, against a South African company as well, and I think they're competing quite well. What happened was we were trying to, for example, get issued some visas for managers and senior directors to run the operations, and we shared with the authorities that, and we were talking about this, and they said, you know, well, what do we get for this? And we said, look, 4,000 jobs at least are going to be created in the next 2 to 4 years. And just like us, when HSBC, which was the British bank in the Middle East, came here, we didn't have experience in banking or global finance or trade finance. So we brought them here. We worked with them. Some of the junior clerks that started there eventually became the chairman of that banking institution. Abdul Jalil Yusuf Darwish, Isa Al Gur, and so on and so forth. So you actually gain the experience, you work through the ranks, you really earn your stars and stripes, and then you can lead, and then they have become businessmen in their own rights. Very well known ones, and this is what we hope to see also from Africa eventually.
What about the number of bankable projects you're coming across in Africa? How difficult is it in the current global climate to raise finance sometimes?
I think it's a matter of connecting the right people to the right people. Africa has an infrastructure gap of about 56 to 60 billion. I mean, the past few years, maybe my numbers are out of date, but that's a sizable amount. I think there are there are some fast movers. There are some very efficient countries. There are really good places to start, and I think the window now is very important, because we're looking at financing, international discounting, as well as investments, because we feel with the free trade agreement and with the expertise coming in of the next generation, which I am very lucky and proud to work with in my offices as well, my opinion is that it's just going to be 1 generation to 1.5 generation before you see the exponential shooting up of Africa. And they won't say Africa is rising. Africa is going to be at 35,000 feet and cruising. So, and once you establish some of these manufacturing hubs that will be supplying each other amongst the continent, you're going to have competition from inside Africa. So that's why we're telling investors to get into Africa now, and some are doing so.
And still, you know, there's still a lot of Afro-pessimism even within the continent.
Yes.
What do you say to that?
Well, there were many pessimists when DP World started, when the Jebel Ali Free Zone was initiated, where people said it's too big and nobody will come. There was pessimism about Emirates Airlines, as I mentioned before. I think sometimes pessimists, like as they say, misery likes company, and it's very contagious. And it's not. I'm not saying be foolishly optimistic, but I think it's important to connect with the right people who are realistic, but they see the opportunity instead of the hardship. Those are the people who are going to make history.
And just lastly, just think back. I mean, your grandfather, who first came to this neck of the woods, what do you think he would have thought today, seeing not only Dubai how it is, but also Dubai's role in the African continent? What do you think he would have thought?
I think he would be very proud in terms of what we've done. I think he would not be surprised that we've done it together, because that's what happened then, and it's still happening today. And some people always ask us, is Dubai in the first world or the third world? And I said, it's always going to be in between, and that's part of his effectiveness. We have gone through the changes, the evolutions in many different places, so we're still connected to that. We still know how to relate, but also we've visited all over the world and we see the next step, and so we're always going to be a facilitating hub between the past and the future and the present.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a very enjoyable chat with Omar Abdul Aziz Khan, the Director of International Offices of the Dubai Chamber. Certainly it's going to be a busy year for him with Expo 2020 coming here in October. Well, that's all we've got time for on this edition of Captains of Industry. From me, Chris Bishop, here in Dubai, it's goodbye.